And today with me, we have some very strong voices in the startup ecosystem. Naganand Doraswamy from Idea Spring Capital. He has, he was with us last budget. One of the very strong, articulate, and authentic voices in the startup ecosystem. So Naga, thank you for coming today. We have Rishabh Bharadwaj from Khaitan, partner at Khaitan. Again, a very strong champion, and I have had the fortune of working with him, and I know that he has a very clear and articulate voice when it comes to the policies, when it comes to what is happening and what should happen in the startup ecosystem. And I have today with me Indruj Singh Rai, partner at Khaitan, and I have had the fortune of meeting you for the first time today online, and I've been told that you're a taxation expert, so we look forward to listening from all of you. With that, I open the house and ask all of you that if you had to start and give us your initial view on what should be done that actually startups grow, because they need to grow fast, because that is how we will see revival, actually fast revival happening in our economy. Naga.
Yeah, so Shraddha, two things are extremely important outside of good entrepreneur. Two things that come to mind: one is customers and one is capital, right? Because these fundamentals for any startups to grow. If you don't have capital, although there might be some voices that say, you have to have your own capital, but capital in some form becomes very important. That is number one. And customers are also as equally important, because if there's no one paying for your product, startups will find it very hard to grow. I think those are the two areas where the government is seriously looking into various policies and enabling how to get more capital into India, how to make it more friendly, number one. And when I say capital, it's not just infusion of capital, but also enabling exits, right? Because that is how you create a virtuous cycle of what is prodding innovation along, creating more startups. I think that is one area that needs significant focus. And the second one is customers. The good news I am seeing in the market with my own portfolio companies is all the unicorns. There are 37 unicorns in India. In the sense, people, when I say unicorn, I'm using the term because they have the ability to buy now. It is good to see that they are buying from Indian startups. So hence the ease of selling in India has improved. Not only that, we are also seeing that the larger banks and the larger insurance companies are now open to buying software from Indian startups, right? Typically, it was very hard to sell to them, but that has significantly changed over a period of last 1-2 years. And also the Atmanirbhar Bharat that is coming in. It's very, very nice when I talk to many people saying, we want to buy Indian products. So I think the ability for Indian startups to sell in India is easing up. I think that's a great enabler for Indian startups. You not only have to sell in India, but across the world. But these two things are improving and a lot more can be done. So I think we'll focus on customers and capital, and that would be my starting thoughts for this panel.
Yeah, and Naga, before I proceed, I wanted to say that, the Microsoft results that came last evening, $43 billion in one quarter. Yeah. Now enterprise tech is also mainstream and sexy. Yeah. And I think more investment.
Same is true with Apple, Shraddha, 112 billion in the quarter.
Yeah. We have benchmarks clearly established. Yeah. Rishabh?
No, I agree. I echo what Naga said. Capital and customer are the key for any growth story, for scaling up or reaching out or for expansion. They are the key factors. I think on that note, coming back to the issue of this discussion, I think one of the key things that we would expect, if not in the budget, but shortly, would be some clarity on the capital that has been stuck or the lack of supply of capital on account of the China ban. There was news recently that the government would be taxing this restriction for Hong Kong-based investors. That should be looked at very seriously and at promptly, because India was receiving a lot of capital from China. That has helped a lot of startups grow in the last couple of 3-4 years. That has suddenly dried up, and Hong Kong being an international financial center and is having so much of Indians or people of Indian origin residing there, all of that capital not being accessible to Indian markets is actually something that we need to look at seriously. And that is something in my wish list for, if not for the budget speech, but immediately after that, but in the in near future, that's something that the government should really look at and to the relax.
Yeah, thank you. Rishabh, this point will resonate with a lot of entrepreneurs because the growth capital, a lot of growth capital in the last 3-4 years was coming from China and Chinese investors. Yeah, so yeah, thank you. Important point. Indruj?
Thanks, Shraddha. Hi. No, I think picking up from what Naga and Rishabh are saying, and I, add in my sort of points from a tax perspective, as important as it is commercially for capital to flow in, it's also equally important and flows in entirety. If you're putting $1, the dollar is received by the company and it's not taxed. While you do have some bit of relaxations, we've been talking about angel tax now for the past few years. And it's arguable whether it was even needed in first place and you had enough provisions. And are you taxing companies for getting money that they require for the business? And as you must be aware, there've been a lot of talks with the government past few years. They've made relaxations. It's been good. They've been responsive in terms of hearing what the market ask was. Clearly, you don't get everything you wish for, but there was significant relaxations. And I think there is enough room to do more. We can talk about the specifics as we go along, but you need to provide a mechanism, and I think budget's a good place to address this, wherein when the capital comes in, it's not taxed, the conditions around are not restrictive, the startups can grow, they can enter into more joint ventures, they can set up more subsidiaries without worrying about losing their tax exemption. And like Naga mentioned, it's not just about money coming in, it's also about exits. So how do you treat and how do you tax the gains that you make on startups? Are you giving any concessions? Overseas listing will be talked about. Will we have special regime for taxation or not? So there is a lot that's there on expectations. We hope that's sort of met. But really, it's from how I view it, it should be made as conducive as possible. You have a tax holiday for startups of 3 years. What will you do on account of pandemic? Will you extend it a little bit? It's understandable the government's also dealing with pandemic and cash crunch. But, what all can they do for people and whether they can give that, dose of relaxation at the right place? You've taxed high net worth individuals at 37% surcharge. Do you want to reduce that for gains made on startups? Again, to incentivize people who have money to look at this, in a more friendly manner. So there's a lot, happy to discuss more, excited to talk about it. But the whole idea is for it to become as friendly and as seamless for the money to come in, go out and circulate freely so that businessmen focus on business and not worry about, losing their taxes or losing the money to taxes.
Yeah, completely resonate. The entrepreneur side of me completely resonates to this. To all of you, the two crucial things, and you've covered that. We've started the discussion on that. The two most crucial things for startups to grow in our country, and it has to grow. There is no other way. We have to have more entrepreneurs running businesses and creating employment. Our capital, and as Naga started with, is around exits, because we have seen more than $50 billion being invested in the startup ecosystem. So we have to see liquidity over there to get more money to come in. I would love to hear from you. What can we do to have more capital in the hands of startups, and what can we do to see more exits?
So I think, from when I look at all my portfolio, like Shraddha, and what is important, there are multiple ways to get exits, right? And one is M&A, for which you need buyers either in India or outside of India. That is number one. Second one is, like you said, rightly pointed out, listing in India. And then obviously startups could not list on the regular market that is available today. So you have to create a new place, new exchanges to do it, which we are working with SEBI on. iSpirit and other organizations are working with SEBI on innovative growth platform, right? Which is exactly the platforms where a Series B raising startup can come and list before they can go on the onward journey into actually becoming a public company listed. That is the second one. And the third one that people are also talking about is, ability for the startups to list directly outside in India, even though they are a private limited company, right? So they don't have necessarily list in India to list outside, but let them list directly outside, and that will greatly increase the confidence of the US investors also, right? Investors coming from outside, they see the opportunity that a startup that is domiciled in India can suddenly list in anywhere outside of India without having to necessarily go public, which is fairly hard to go public in India for a startup. I think you're going to open up confidence for the international investors, and the ability for the startups to get exits, whether it's in India or through an M&A or a listing outside of India. I think you just need to enable all options, because you never know which option will work, right? We started off with this, a platform where you could list, but that didn't really take off. And that's what SEBI is doing with us now, saying, how can we now translate that into something that is more amenable, where, you have increased the potential for startups to fix. And we have done a lot of work with SEBI in enabling that. But I think you should look at this holistically. It's just not one, just open up all possible opportunities for exits. Because if you don't see exits, then there is this deep trouble deep trouble brewing, because you'll not see just people putting money. They also want to know how to get an exit. And secondly, to what Rishabh and Indruj also said, how easily can they exit, right? If you say, yeah, we can exit, but you have to jump 10 hurdles before you see the money come, hit the account, it will not work. I think hence enabling multiple exits and also making it easy for investors to get their money back, I think those are the key efforts that we need to do. And then, everything is underway. It's just that we need to speed up the process and get the IGP going, get the ability to list outside going, and also the ease of business of getting the money back once you do an M&A also needs to be accelerated. Because even today, when I spoke to a investor, Silicon Valley investor in the morning, and I said, would you invest in an Indian domicile startup? He said, answer no. I said, why?
Yeah.
You want to invest? He said, no, one is liability. I said, what liability? There's no liability anymore. I'm not taking any liability. That's one thing. Oh, okay. And then the second one was, we will not be, the one is liability and one is IP. I said, there's no issue with IP now. And the third one is, how will I get my money back? I said, if you're a AIF, there's absolutely no problems. You can see the money flowing back into you very easily. RBI allows it. So I think there is a lot of perceptions that is still sitting out there. So by opening up these platforms and enabling, increasing the confidence of people outside the country will go a long way. And we need external capital. We just cannot say that all capital will come from India. And that not work. If you want to go from 10 billion that was invested to 50, you got to get external capital, right? Because the ratio is 1:4:10 between India, China, and US in terms of the capital availability. So we got to do something about it, right? And then that's the only way is to get external capital, and you need to enable that by doing all these things. And I'll let Rishabh and Indruj to comment more on this. And if anything else, I'll come back after that.
I completely agree with you, Naga. Actually, not all problems of law and economics will be solved by legal or regulatory changes. I think SEBI has done a lot, and iSpirit and the likes have done a lot to have discussions with SEBI to move in right directions for listing startups outside of the main regulatory framework or the main board, as it is called. But it is also a function of the maturity of the market and the act of or the deepness of the market, the capital markets. To that end, in my view, I think it's important that both overseas listing and the domestic GP and the likes should be run parallel. Because once you start seeing success in domestic listing, then perhaps that will give some foreign investors the confidence to also consider their portfolios being listed on platforms like IGP. So both of these will have a role to play in the coming years. It cannot be, and in the past few years we've just been working on the IGP front, or at it used to be called ITP earlier. So once you have that confidence that startups are listing abroad and they are seeing success outside, there is good liquidity in the market. That will give confidence to the IGP framework as well. The new proposal or the new consultation paper was rolled out earlier, shortly, I think in December, and that has considered a fair bit of proposals that the industry and bodies have put forth, and that is out for that was rolled out for comments. But on the direct listing front, other than enabling, making enabling provisions under the Companies Act, much have moved. There are discussions that, or there are some draft rules that are in discussion right now. But yes, nothing has rolled out even for public consultation or public comments. So I think it will be good to see, to have a swift movement on both these fronts in at least in this financial year, in the coming financial year, so that as you said, as Naga said, right, the investors' worry of having an exit only through a M&A is not the only liquidity option they get for the investment they make, and that also would solve for the flipping problem that the government sees it. That we see, a lot of startups look at flipping. Now, to my mind, it should be free, whether a startup wants to flip or not for whatever reasons, that it should be allowed. And we are now in the second or the third decade of our FEMA, the more relaxed capital controls. I think it is about time that we start looking at, more capital account convertibility and more freedom on capital account transactions. So whether for whatever reasons flipping happens, it should be to the commercial wisdom of the founder and the company. But one of the reasons for flipping is to allow overseas listing, to avoid regulatory or regulatory burden in India, compliance burden in India, etc., or even for some sort of asset protection. There are investors who are slightly wary about IP protection, etc., in India, which is not correct in most sense, but yes, that is a perceptual issue that we have. But yes, allowing overseas listing and then the growth of IGP would also help solving these problems.
You're looking at overseas listing, but I think what's important is that you have the beneficial tax provisions also introduced along with it, and in a comprehensive manner. Today you have in India, your listed entities, capital gains are taxed at a lower rate of 10% compared to 20% capital gains tax on an unlisted entity on a long-term basis. And this used to be exempt before 2018, So, and there's some chats, where you have now securities transaction tax being levied in India, and you have capital gains tax also. So is it double taxation somewhere? And whether you want to eliminate that entirely. And when it comes to something like this, do you give a similar basis to start with, where it's also 10% vis-a-vis 20%, at least for, even when you have domestic investors who are getting, whose shares are also getting listed abroad? Or do you want to start with a mechanism which is, giving it more liquidity, more freedom, and it's completely exempt, and hence you really launch it as something which is very attractive, more than any other investments that you look around, to give it a real boost? The other thing that Rishabh talked about is flipping, so which is basically, if today you have founders who are part of an Indian entity, or Indian startup, and they want to list overseas and they want to consolidate their holding in offshore level, what they do is they transfer their holding to the foreign entity, and in return, they get shares in the foreign entity. Now, at that stage, the founders get taxed, even though they're not getting any money. What they're getting is notional for notional. They're getting shares issued for what they are giving. So whether you want to, and in most of the foreign countries don't tax swaps, right? So you may want to continue taxing swaps otherwise, but whether you want to make it more liquidity based so that you don't tax the swap, you reduce the cost in future exits. So effectively, you're taxing the entire gains in future as and when the money is made. So these are some of the measures you could look at, ensuring that your domestic tax law is amended adequately to say if a recognized startup, recognized stock exchange grants certain benefit, then foreign stock exchanges are also included for the purpose of listing of Indian entities. And secondly, you have provisions like this which exempt the flipping, which is not really exemption. You're just taxing at the right time when you're really making money, instead of just notional exchanges.
They are very valid points. And when you were saying this, I just thought about ESOP policy, because they were, it's just somewhere similar, right? Like what's saying is that there were changes, but still, I think there has to be a change in the ESOP policy, because in my team only, a lot of people, they have to pay. There is no money right now, but they have to shell cash to get the shares. What do you have to say about that?
I think, some bit of, hue and cry was heard and addressed. You had the change last year, right? So earlier what would happen is the company would have to withhold tax when allotting shares under an ESOP scheme. And this is not linked to any liquidity on companies' hands. Like you say, I mean, if tomorrow, say for example, you're getting 100 as value of shares, you're having to pay, and if this is the highest bracket, you're having to pay 42 as tax. And where do you get that money from? It's probably more than your years of salary put together. So how do you even make it? So that in a way forces you to push the exercise to a point when you really see liquidity coming in, where the founders are exiting and you can exit with them. And then that's when, so it pushes the entire benefit in a way, and taxes a higher amount in your hand at a later date. So the change that was brought in last year was that there was a deferral of tax by 5 years, or if you exited earlier. But one of the onerous conditions that should go away is that if the employee leaves the company in that 5-year period, then the tax trigger happens at that time. So you're forcing a person to stay on in a company beyond the incentive plan the company's looked out for you. So, there could be, solutions. For example, withholding tax is just a mechanism to pay tax early and in a right way. You could do away with that withholding tax on ESOP and let the ESOP holder, the employee, pay the tax directly, especially where someone's leaving. You're putting the liability on the person who's making the money and not holding the company responsible for it, and having an arrangement where everyone's paying taxes nearer to the time when they're making, the money, the income.
I want to understand, today when it comes to startups, is it viable or is it utopian to say that for startups, we should make it very easy when it comes to taxation? What do you think we should do overall when it comes to taxation for startups?
It's a taxation issue. I'll let Indru answer the tax part, and I'll come to the business and the technology side post him answering that.
Thanks, Naga. So I think, Shraddha, you do have exemptions today in place, right? You have a tax holiday, which says, and this started by saying that first 3 years are exempt from taxes, and everyone said, you don't have profits,
you don't have anything.
Exactly. So, it's anyway a gestation period. There's no point exempting it during the gestation period. Then the government said, okay, what we will do is you can pick that 3-year window. When do you want it? So not towards the early part. So now it is 3 years, then it was 3 years out of 7 years, then became 3 years out of 10 years. So, one is that you can maybe, elongate that window of exemption, have a tax holiday like you had for SEZs, etc. It was 5 years, 100%, then another 5 years, 50%. So you could look at something similar. The other thing is of what is the definition of startup, and who are these benefits available to? So you have a criteria around how much, you cannot have investment more than 25 crores. So whether it should really be linked to something like that, or you can have a little more objective test. You have restrictions on how much turnover can you have. Now, today you have startups which have massive cash burn, right? But they have zero profits. So their turnover goes through the roof if you just look at the turnover numbers, but they're not going to make profits for many years. So again, you could change the criteria and parameter to look at profit-based test. Okay, when you cross this much profit, then probably you're not a startup anymore instead of turnover, because it would completely depend on businesses, right? So you have these good thoughts, you just need to make them more effective, by how really it's translating on ground in terms of what test you have. So clearly, just make it easier to claim the tax exemption. The government's looked at it, the whole DPIIT body that was set up, and how the whole form filing, it was under a lot of criticism earlier. You had to give investor details, you had to give other details. It was a long form. All of that was streamlined. So definitely it's not, that no one's listening. The government has been reacting. But maybe, if these things are done in day one, you see a lot more coming instead of reacting to the market over years in bits and pieces. So I think there is definitely room to just make the exemptions and the promises you have a little more effective and efficient.
Look, it's always, we always say give exemption for startups, but I think, government is also, as you said, in a very tight spot, and more so this year. I think what we need to do is subsidize or give incentives for innovation, whether it's a startup or a mid-size or a large company, right? Because, even if you look at overall R&D investment, India is at about 1.5% of the GDP, as opposed to US, which is 4, China, which is 3, right? I think as a country, I would say, rather than just saying startup or something, just make sure that you incentivize innovation. I would look at it a little differently. because you also need the large guys to start putting more money into innovation, into R&D and things like that, because the R&D that larger firms invest in, it becomes a feeder to startups, right? Otherwise, where are you going to get entrepreneurs from? Where are you going to get technology from? Because you don't want to keep on depending on the GICs that are there in India to keep on feeding the tech talent. You want our own companies, Indian companies, to say, all right, we are going to create technology, we are going to create R&D, we are going to create innovation. That will then become a feeder into the startup ecosystem. So I would say, if the startups are starting to make money, it is only fair that they also pay their part of the taxes, because I cannot say keep on giving tax holidays to startups, but have a uniform policy saying, we should make sure that we have a common policy across all corporations to make sure that innovation is encouraged, and then you give benefits for innovation and you reduce taxes on that part. So I think that is what I would look at. And on the other question you asked me on B2C, I have no idea. So that's why I don't know how to invest in B2C. I'm hoping that all these guys will start making money at some point. But I think that is also changing, right? Because more and more funds are now asking question on what is your unit economics, when are you going to make profit? But that's a topic for another day. We'll have another nice discussion on that.
Yeah, because Naga, the question is also in terms of today. We are in January of 2021, and we have to ask the question about the depth of the market, right? Like, because these are very heavily funded startups, businesses. They are iconic. We all look up to. We are all consumers of these platforms, and somewhere I think it's more about the question about the depth in the market, and that's what I wanted to ask more than the companies.
Correct. No, so the depth, like we are seeing all those things pick up quite nicely, right? Even in the paper today, we are saying that e-commerce will become $1 billion or whatever. The numbers are there. I think how do we quickly achieve it? When does it get to tier 2, tier 3? But if you look at the trends, right, the more and more consumptions are now coming from tier 2, tier 3 market. It's not what we are saying 4 years ago. We are saying, okay, the entire e-commerce segment is for the 50 million. Now, if that 50 million changes to, like, say 500 million, I think that is where you will see the scale, and that is starting to happen now. When is that the graph going to change over from loss to profitability? I think capturing as much as the 500 million that is available out there as soon as possible. I think that is where you'll see that change happening, and it is underway now, right? The internet, we have 700 million internet users today, right? And they will start consuming. So everybody is betting on the fact that they'll start consuming, they'll start paying. So, once you get from 50 to 500 to 700 million, I think that is when you start seeing the transition. So it'll be interesting. Hopefully, I don't have the timeline for the depth, like the question you asked, but the numbers are slowly showing up in terms of people wanting to do transactions on the internet, including like what is UPI enabled, in terms of banking, and in terms of the whole thing. The digital revolution is picking up steam quite a bit, and that should help. But I don't have a good answer to your question on when will that happen. That I don't know.
Two questions. Again, you may consider it utopian, but one, how do we incentivize more people to start up? How do we get more people to start up? Is there something the government can do to get more people, more young people? Because we have the most pressing challenge of employment generation. And second thing, is there another, again, utopian, but can entrepreneurs be incentivized if they are creating more jobs?
Sure. I think a lot of that is a function of tax. So I'll let Indruj comment on that. But my immediate thought is that I think as a country, as a society, we are very entrepreneurial. And even at a smaller or a mid-tier level itself, you will see a lot of people having their own businesses, having their own thing. A lot of people are now, using the resources available on account of whether it's internet or knowledge otherwise available. A lot of people are looking at innovative, products and services, even at smaller towns and mid-tier level. So to that extent, and like I said earlier, not all problems of law and economics can be solved by regulatory or legal changes. It is also a function of how we evolve. It is a function of the platform being given to them. We are in the right direction. There are things that can be done, that can be improved, or can be made better. But I think overall, we are in the right direction as a nation, as society. And it's also because of our inherent entrepreneurial nature. One thing that comes to my mind, and I will leave that thought with, which is to perhaps reduce the personal taxes, significantly, so that that doesn't bite, or that doesn't hit the entrepreneur at a personal level. Corporate taxes are there because corporates have been the engines of growth and engines of employment. So there's always been the assumption for corporates getting reduced, tax burden. But at an individual level, you see the taxes are really high. So perhaps that is something that can be looked at, not over a period of time. Again, I don't know what period of time. I don't have immediate thought on that, but yeah, that is something that we should certainly look at.
Yeah, we are counting on the government this time not increasing the personal tax, because they also want us to spend. So let's cross our fingers that at least the personal tax should not increase this year. Yeah. Indruj?
Yeah, so I think, picking from what Rishabh is saying, that, I mean, we are on the right track. So, and this also sort of talks about the point that Naga raised earlier. How do you sort of incentivize entrepreneurs, and what kind of tax exemption you have? Like Naga said, maybe one way to look at it is you only incentivize innovation, right? R&D, innovation, and that's a fair point when you look at startups. But I think what, in a welcome way, government has done for now is the definition of startup includes any venture that you have which will result in job creation or wealth creation. Now, those terms are very wide. So effectively, any entity can be a startup if you really look at it. So, it's a bit of both. It's a bit of, to your question to begin with, that you're incentivizing people who are creating more jobs, regardless of whether it's really in the innovation industry or not. And then to Naga's point, as another angle to look at it, then are you just incentivizing giving tax breaks to everyone? So it's a bit of a balancing factor, but I think right now, it is a liberal definition, if I may put it that way, to cover more people. So I think, so somewhere, it's sort of how I see it. I think it does incentivize people. Yes, talking about personal taxations and personal tax rates that you have, I mean, clearly, I think India is a very high taxing country. You pay high level of tax when you earn, you pay high level of tax when you spend, and there is no sort of end to the different ways, the cesses and levies that come across. But clearly, I mean, with we know, with the increase in rate that happened so recently, probably the government's not going to reduce it, anytime soon. And especially for people above a certain bracket, and especially what they're facing. So I would put it also in the same way, that let's hope it's not increased further, instead of really wishing for a moonshot to say it'll probably be reduced this year.
Rishabh, I wanted to ask you about the Companies Act and around compliances. If you could talk to us about that.
Sure. Thanks, Arishada. So I think on that front, we had good progress, I would say, ever since the Act was, implemented in 2013-14. There have been, it became a little burdensome for startups, and I would cover all private companies in that ambit. It was, burdensome as compared to the 1956 Act. And over a period of time, with various relaxations, etc., it is going back to the similar set of flexibility that was afforded to private companies. And the recent decriminalization of contraventions was a very good step. So again, steps are going in right direction. And I think Indruj or Naga mentioned earlier that it's always the problem that we see is that it's always a reactionary approach to what the market is saying or what the feedback coming, or but I would say that it's important to look at the streamlining and ease of doing business holistically, and not do it in a phased manner, or not do it based on reactions. It shouldn't be a reactionary approach. Now, for example, in the entire pandemic, companies have been allowed to hold general meetings through audiovisual means. Now, which means that we can do it. So why is it an exception? Why is it not a norm? Why should not companies be allowed to hold, especially private companies, be allowed to hold their shareholders or general meetings through audiovisual means? That will result in more shareholder participation rather than more shareholders waiving and not participating in those meetings. It's a good step towards corporate governance, a culture that startups need to build when they have to grow and scale, and eventually look at listing, etc. Similarly, even board meetings, they've been allowed to be held via audiovisual means, but it's with various conditions. One of which is that you have to record the meeting and keep it somewhere. I mean, why? I mean, you don't have to record or you don't have to do physical meetings in camera and to keep that recording. So why have that undue burden on board meetings that are happening remotely? I mean, the technology currently is good enough today to just replace the physical boundaries and do it online, like we are talking here right now. So those are some of the things that I think we should have a holistic approach and not a reactionary approach. One of the things that I also, it's been there, but and there have been good developments on streamlining these processes are around FEMA compliances after receipt of foreign capital or after an exit or an M&A. Now, while on paper it's very straightforward, it's very it's a good checklist model of compliance, but in practice, what happens is that you are at the mercy of the bank in a lot of instances, and it all boils down to the how good your bank is a service provider, and not as a regulatory intermediary, and that results in delays, that results in at times non-compliances. Which are completely avoidable, and the teams and the founders should be looking at better. I mean, should be spending their time for better things to do rather than to be dealing with these kind of issues. That's another area that we can work on. And like I said, it's been the third decade of FEMA. We really need to start looking at more relaxations on our capital account transactions and free convertibility or generally on the compliance front on FEMA.
There was a mail floating around where the number of compliances a startup needs to file in a year is 170, right? 170 filings they have to do in a year. I think that has to be definitely reduced. There's no point in making the founders go through all this pain in the early stages of the company. Once you become mature and you need to have more controls, do what needs to be, and then you can also hire people. One of the biggest issues we face when we invest is going through the diligence part. Because most of the startups, before an institutional investors come on board, they always miss things because there's so many things, and they would not have gotten a company secretary on board to go through all these points. And even as an entrepreneur, as a founder, I don't want to do any of those things. Let me be very straightforward, because it's onerous and it is cumbersome. And it makes no sense. There's no meaning to all those things when you're still not making any revenue, right? Just filing 170 paperwork is like completely a non-starter for many startups. So once we come on board, it's not a great solution, but we say, hey, get a company secretary on board day one, right? Because that's the only way you will be able to figure out you're following all the regulatory guidelines, and because you cannot afford to violate any of these things, because these are very looked upon very seriously. So there is, in my mind, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done from a company law, from all these regulatory things, to say, till you start making revenues, just don't burden the founders with all these things, because as it is, they are struggling with the product, struggling with the customers, struggling to scale. And top of it, you put this layer, it's meaningless at this stage of the company. So a lot to be done in that space, in my mind.
Yeah, I have to tell all of you that a year before 2019, I was called by the income tax department, and they said, how can your shares be this? You tell stories. First of all, they were all laughing. And then stories, something wrong you must be doing. But anyways, I think that's the need of the, I think it should, because, for us, going to an income tax department is only, and coming from, the backgrounds that we come, I don't know, why are we called? We are first so scared, then why are we called? And yeah, so I think a lot needs to change so that it becomes easier. It becomes easier, and all these compliances, if they could be streamlined, and then like Rishabh, you were saying, if this can also be done online, rather than all the paperwork and everything that one has to do. Even now, when one raises funds, one has to sign so many papers.
Actually, again, in the pandemic, that did change, and throughout the year, we've not done any physical execution, rarely, and where we had to print papers. It's all been remote, PDF based.
I hope
execution.
It continues.
Yeah. I hope so too. Yeah. I mean, again, it's law recognizes it, and there is no need for having it print and do it, through vetting. But yeah, there are certain loopholes on digital signatures and digital signing, etc. But yes, I think that will that again should, I mean, it's larger scheme of things that we are talking about that should also get sorted in the months to come or the years to come.
But Rishabh, when you were saying that the board meeting, one of the things is that board meetings should be recorded, I was thinking, oh my God, that could be the new Netflix series. If the board meetings get leaked and what happens in a board meeting, if that is required by law.
That's a very genuine risk, because board discussions are confidential, and what if it leaks? And that is one of the reasons why people were not adopting for audiovisual board meets, because of that requirement that it has to be recorded, and pandemic forced, because people were working remotely, they were not available in the same office or same city or town. But that is a genuine risk, especially given how things get leaked and how things happen. It is a serious risk on breach of board's confidentiality.
Question to all of you. One of the things we are discussing today about capital exits, taxation when it comes to startups. But one of the things, and this is very national India question I wanted to ask, not just pertaining to startups, I think we have not done a good job as a country to tell our stories of reform. Somehow we don't sell our reforms and the improvements and things that are happening very well. What do you have to say? Because all of you interact with investors, with communities across the world. And there's still this perception around Indian companies. There's still a perception around that India is not, we are not compliant, we are not very truthful. Do you see that we need to do something about changing those perceptions? And what can we do?
So Shraddha, inherently, if you look at our culture, it's always been don't say too many things. There's no need to blow about. I think a lot of it is cultural, right? And even if you look at all the companies, one of the technically we're very sound, we can build great products, but in terms of telling the story that that you do, we are not that great. Our marketing capability, our ability to say gloat about ourselves, we don't have it in us. But I think if the rest of the world is doing it, it behoves to that we also do.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing that change coming in quite a bit. Even in the last 5 years, if you look at the entrepreneur's capability in terms of messaging of their company, in terms of the product story, and then how they go about convincing the customers, we have come a long way. That is number one. And also in terms of content marketing, we have gotten a lot better, right? So from a microscopic view of startups, each startup and each founder's capability, you're now starting to see a big improvement in terms of how they market their company, how they market their product, how they onboard customers, and how they build case studies. So I think from a company perspective, that has changed. But I think some of these have to become success stories, and we have to build on that for the perception to change as well. And that, I think, will take time, because you're not going to change that overnight. So the journey has started. The capability is now being built in. So I don't worry so much so about the product messaging stories that I used to worry 5 years ago. It still needs to get better. It still needs to change, but we are on that path. So that is a good news. But I think to change the perception, you need to see some results, and we need to see some M&As happen. We need to see some listings happen. And the enablement needs to come, the execution has to happen, and only post that, once people start seeing things actually happen, is when they start believing in things. Just saying things, they'll come back and say, oh, you said this, but you did this, right? There will be Vodafone tax case that will come up. Oh, you said this, but you went back on the. So I think hence there's nothing better way to prove than actually execute on a few of these thought processes that we are talking about, and then change the perception.
Yeah, but Naga, I also feel that it's also important, and especially from an entrepreneur, for the startup community, that deals which happens, like, when foreign investors are involved and the deals that go smoothly, I think somewhere that needs to be, because I see that perception in my communication also with investors in Germany, in US, that they feel that it's tedious. More than anything else, the word that comes to, that comes very often is tedious. It's a long drawn process.
And that has also got to with the number of deals, Shraddha. The number of deals are far and few between, right? So that's why I'm saying, and then even in 10 deals, if 2 goes wrong, the 2 will be highlighted. Even 100 deals, 2 goes wrong, 98 will be highlighted. Right? So I think it's a ratio of the number of deals also is important. So I think those are the things that needs to change. Hopefully in the next 5 years, we will start seeing all these good changes happen.
No, I completely agree with Naga's point. I mean, it's a cultural issue, and we've been grown up with word action speaks more words, and I think it's good not to give any confusing message by different words and different action, different words and different actions. So and work towards showcasing through our actions, and then we have you to tell the story further. But yeah, we should all work towards have those actions to build a a better story for you to tell.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, and again going back to tax, and that's what I do all the time, think about. So the perspective is from there. But I think, like you talk about the reforms and the story, I think a similar sort of message, I think that's been worked upon, but could be spread more, is from the tax department and how our government is. The things they've done in past few years. Of course, I mean, I think all of us focus more on what more, and that's the right approach. Of course, you want more growth, but it's also should be somewhere, what has happened right, and in the past few years. For example, Naga mentioned Vodafone tax. Of course, 2012, everyone and the foreign investor sentiments to a big way. But then the government seemed to realize that and commit that, okay, there will be no retrospective taxation anymore until unless it's really beneficial for the taxpayer. And I think it's stuck to that. So they have become aware, and I think they are trying to work towards that image, because at the end of the day, when you're talking about attracting capital, and like you say, TDS, I mean, we work with US, tax advisors, and they send us a question and saying, "Oh, this will be fairly simple for you, and if you can respond just like in an hour or 2 hours," and we still respond in an hour or 2 hours, but with a 10-pager, and then they just get thrown off, and they think, oh, this will be so standard, because they're seeing, how things work in different countries, and suddenly when it comes to it, you're like, oh wow, there's a lot. So I think, somewhere that messaging that it is improving. You have all these steps being taken. You have these reforms being taken. You have the government which is mindful, and of course more can be done. But I think it's also a good thing to talk about there is a change at the government level in our functioning, and how different things. I mean, hopefully now there's criticism around e-assessment, like you had to go meet the tax office. Now you won't have to. It's a little more. I mean, if end of the day it may come down to maybe a video call, but they are trying to work around these things. And of course, when you're changing such monumental systems, there will be different issues, and of course there will be again criticism around it. But things are changing. They're trying to come up with more and more circulars where they're telling you, bring about more certainty on how you'll be taxed, how different things will happen. So I think that messaging globally, but yes, of course, I mean, I'll again end with government still can do more, should be doing more. We have the budget in few days, maybe align our taxation to what global best practices are, make it easier for, people in different countries coming in instead of, I mean, I remember one of the recent M&A deals we were doing, and it felt like we were taking, training sessions for the US advisors, because about what happens in India and how different it is. And, so much time just goes in that. So I think aligning it a little more globally would help. But definitely acknowledging what good has also happened.
Last two questions to all of you. If you had to say one thing that you would like to see in this budget when it comes to startups, what would you pick? One thing.
I would say capital gains tax, make it same as public for startups as well. There's no point you're taking more risk, waiting longer, and they're still paying that much tax. It makes no sense. And then that will also incentivize family offices to invest more, because they will see better returns on their capital. Because it really doesn't make sense where you're taking so much risk, but you still pay higher than what you pay in the public market.
Sure, I think completely agree with Naga on that. Reduce the tax rate. I think it always helps. And just to talk about, I think generally in terms of compliance, I mean, again, when we're talking about culture and all from a tax perspective, what comes to mind is historically we've been a nation which was overtaxed always. So as a reaction, people don't want to pay tax, and then government has to go look for people who are not paying tax. At one time, 99% taxation, and who would want to pay such a level of tax at that stage? So I think, reducing the tax rate, I think helps everyone. Incentivizes people. Self-compliance is better. People are, okay with, they find it rational. They come ahead and they pay the taxes themselves timely. The government has to go less after people. So I think definitely always a good idea. And I think collections will only increase if you really take such measures and make it more conducive. And I think the second thing is, incentivize reinvestment into startup shares a little more holistically. Today, you have something where you have an exemption when you sell your house. you use that money, those capital gains, to invest in startup shares, you get a tax exemption. Like you do if you were to buy another house. Maybe make that a little more broader. When you're selling shares of something else and you're putting into startup shares, that's maybe a good way. Instead of just saying, okay, you need to sell your house to put it in the startup to get the exemption. And I like on something similar where the company cannot deal with that, different things around. So I think just all of that, allowing startups to have subsidiaries, joint ventures without losing tax exemptions. So I think streamlining what you have a little bit more, I talked about that earlier, and these two main things: reduce tax rates and incentivize tax exemptions on investment to startup shares.
Indraj, I have one very quick question. The CSR, government is coming up with some new structure or something in the CSR, where I'm told that if they do impact investing, then they get more incentive, and then also they have to declare the impact of the CSR or the investment that they do. Can there be a way to what Naga said, that if you invest in innovation, then you get benefit? Can the CSR money be put in innovation?
Yeah, Shraddha, I think Rishabh will be best placed to answer that from a corporate law perspective. From tax, it's always a bad news because you don't get deduction for CSR expenses. So again, it's about where do you balance it, and whether you still want to give a deduction for all these things and yet qualify it as a CSR expense for your company's law obligation. Rishabh's better placed to answer that, but my bit is that don't take away the tax exemption then.
CSR, contributions or the scope of contribution does cover some R&D activities, but yes, certainly, it should be enhanced, and it should not be only looked at it from a very, not be limited to a social perspective. I mean, it could always have a social, commercial, or a socio-economic, aspect, which is broader than just having social causes. So, I mean, it should certainly have social causes, but it should be widened, and any step in that direction is great. So yeah, I mean, it'll be a welcome step. Going back to your point on what would be my expectation, or what would be on the top of my wish list, would be some clarification on capital from Hong Kong. That's really important, because it is not just affecting investments, it's also affecting M&As, it's also affecting exit opportunities. So it is affecting in a lot of more ways than it was intended to. And certainly, I think even Hong Kong is not that sensitive in terms of geopolitical issues that we are facing. And the other thing would be to speed up the overseas listing process and make it in line with international best practices. Make it don't go the way gone with our other attempts at listing. It should be more progressive. It should be aligned with the international markets. Only then it will make sense. And once that picks up, it's my sense that AGP will pick up in the next few years.
Naga, you are very clear, loud and clear, and we are hoping that we get more domestic people to invest. Somehow I'm just thinking we need to see a fund of fund from India. Do we have an India fund of fund?
No, it's like I read in the paper today, Economic Times, I think, where the Honorable Minister Piyush Goyal is saying that entrepreneurs, all the businesses should come and do a 10,000 India fund of funds where they all put the money. So the only fund of funds that we have as of today is what SIDBI created, and that has been a phenomenal, thing that has happened to the startup ecosystem, because a lot of people have benefited, including me. I think more such things coming into the market. I have read about in the paper again. There was news about the pension funds and the LICs being able to invest in startup and fund of funds, and I think generally increase the capital in India. But at the same time, I want to also be very careful to say just increasing the capital without increasing the customer base is not going to be helpful, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't get way ahead of yourself saying, okay, there's more capital, but nothing coming out of that capital, because it will hit back on you. I think hence I always suggest the holistic approach, saying, but also buy more, enable us to send more. And other thing I want to get rid of, Shraddha, that I want to get rid of Softex for all the SaaS companies. That's another thing that I absolutely want to stop, because it makes no sense. So I think those are the kinds of things, right? Enable us to sell more globally and to India, and also enable the capital, and then that's how we will become the product capital of the world, right? So I know that's the hope, and we're all working towards that, and we'll make sure it happens.
How much of emotion do you bring to your work? Because I'm asking, you guys are lawyers. Do lawyers have emotions when you are working? Because I feel they don't. And Naga, quickly to you, as an investor, do you bring emotions because you're looking at your returns, IRRs only?
Part of the game. Without that, it's hard to kind of push yourself. So yes, you do bring in those, but as you say, you can't let emotions muddle your thoughts. So yeah, you got to bring it, but you also need to know that in our case, at least, you need to let the entrepreneurs drive their companies. Our emotions cannot come in the way of entrepreneurs achieving their dreams. Our ability, we need to support the entrepreneurs to achieve their dreams, and that's the level of emotion that we bring to the table, or at least I bring to the table.
So that's correct, and it is it is like you cannot let it muddle your thoughts, but yeah, emotions are certainly there. Without emotions, there is. I think you wouldn't be driven as much. So it's quite a key for any profession, I would say. Whether it's as boring as ours.
But I think emotions are the driving fuel in terms of the effort, and how frivolously we put it. And I think for me personally, we look at, I think I do believe we are a very high taxing jurisdiction. Like I said, we earn, we pay tax, high tax, we spend. So wherever you can sort of optimize it within the framework, one feels that yes, you're doing that. And wherever you can simplify things, I think more than anything else, making people aware, because we have so many deemed taxations. So wherever you feel, you're helping the businessmen do the business better, and in a more easier manner, and you sort of contribute to that, and do things in a more optimized manner. I think that's the feeling you bring in to achieve. So certainly, I think it's a driving force.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Thank you. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Shraddha.
Thank you, Shraddha, for having us.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. So.